This video is sponsored by my OnlyFans, where I do my meaningful sex educational content, fitness, health, nutrition, relationship advice, and more.
Hello friends, I hope you're all doing well. First, I'll have to clarify that I don't actively watch the show, but I do follow it and learn what is happening. So these are merely my general, most basic thoughts on Amazon's approach to the lore. So I will not go into too much detail. I will not critique every single thing. I will not go about the designs and directing. Just focus on general thoughts about the lore deviations. But I will not include any spoilers to future events from the literature. So no worries. I have been a Tolkien fan for 23 years or so. I am no scholar nor an expert by any means, but Tolkien was and always will be a huge part of my life. And honestly, I cannot imagine myself without his writings and the inspiration of his own character, and of course that of his son Christopher. May they both rest in peace. I have the letters of Tolkien, The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, The Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, all the volumes of the Histories of Middle-earth, and the 3 standalone books of the First Age, which are The Children of Húrin, Beren and Luthien, and The Fall of Gondolin. And I have more books from Tolkien or books about him, but when it comes to the Legendarium, I believe that these are the crucial ones. As for the show, now granted, the season is not done yet. We are just on episode 5 as I'm recording this, but thus far the show really took serious liberties with the lore, to the point of going against it on several occasions. My main issue with it is the pretense of being an adaptation, or even to just be inspired by the literature. If they're going so far off the road, then we're left with something extremely different. And then one might ask why? Why stray away so much from the main path? To me, it is a missed opportunity. I imagine that the main challenge for Amazon was their lack of rights to the content they wanted to depict. After all, most of the writings on the Second Age could be found in the Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales, which they don't have the rights to. Now, we did see some elements that were allowed to be used, I assume by the Tolkien estate, like the image of the two trees, Telperion and Laurelin, mentioning of the Valar and Beleriand, and of all sorts of items and other names, but these are references and not a heavy foundation to the events in the show. So in my opinion, it was best not to even try that. I think they should have stuck to the appendices of The Lord of the Rings, to which they had the rights. And at the end I could give a few ideas about possible shows from the appendices. So by focusing on the Second Age as a whole, Amazon were forced to at least rely on the Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales, as well as to compress the timeline to include everything they wanted to show, all the events. As a result, though, they had to come up with a lot of original content, and original content could work, but I believe that they wrote too much, and a lot of it doesn't work in relation to the lore. The time compression truly takes away from the meat of the major narrative in the Second Age and the event which unfolded because of it. The deviations from the lore go beyond the rights issues. Characters, for example, are extremely different. Mainly Galadriel, Elrond, and Gil-galad, they are the main ones that come to mind. because they are extremely different to their character from the literature. Galadriel is not only different, but what she's doing is completely made up on the show. And Gil-galad and Elrond, they relate to the next point about the deviations, which is themes. Themes are not that well portrayed on the show. They are, again, different to a great degree. Like Numenor's envy and hatred to the elves, not exactly what it is supposed to be. The Numenorians, they envied the elves' immortality, and they were angry with the Valar for supposedly not granting them immortality, because they misunderstood what is this immortality, and they thought that the Valar are trying to hide some secret from them, but it happened on the course of centuries, and because of the time compression, we just don't get this sense, and we are left with something that pales in comparison. And another big theme that is really mistreated on the show is the breaking and keeping of oaths. We've seen in episode 5 that Gil-galad is trying to convince Elrond to break an oath. This is extremely serious, especially since Gil-galad and Elrond should know more than anyone else how severe oaths are in the Legendarium, in Arda. When you swear something, it means a lot, and breaking it means much more. To the point of when you took an oath, you don't want to break it. That's what happened in the first age. All the events that unfolded, all the bad things that unfolded in the first age were due to one very infamous oath that Gil-galad and Elrond suffered a lot from, especially Elrond. So Gil-galad being... This is actually an act of great evil to convince Elrond to ruin himself literally by breaking an oath. This is serious. So it boggled my mind. And another thing that the show does is coming up with original ideas to plots or whatever that contradict a lot of what we know, like the Mithril, all that story about the tree and how the Mithril absorbed the light, and the light relates to the life of elves who are decaying without the light. That's not true. I mean, that's blending a lot of different things that have nothing to do with this metal, and they are confused, and I'm getting confused just by talking about it. So no, this is completely made up, but it's not working. And I have another point, which is the hobbits. Now, I love hobbits, and I don't know, I'm not going to critique the performances of the hobbits on the show, but I just, bring this point that hobbits are not mandatory to Middle-earth. Maybe there is this thought that, we cannot tell a Middle-earth story without hobbits. Now, when Tolkien, when he just in the early days started to write tales about this legendarium that was coming to life, he wrote tales from the elder days, which would later become the first age. There were no hobbits. Hobbits are a much later addition to this whole legendarium that came to be. Same with the Istari, the wizards. Same with Galadriel. They are even Sauron, in a way. These are later additions, so it's not that you cannot tell a Middle-earth story without hobbits. Hobbits had nothing to do with the first age and the second age. The stories of the first and second age, and even a great deal of the third age, they stand in their own right. So the idea that you need hobbits in them, it just, to me at least, it takes away from those other stories. It reduces them in a way. But, that's just how I feel about it. So I apologize for ranting and stumbling on my words, probably. I hope that I was coherent enough and that I conveyed my thoughts as a Tolkien fan. As ideas for shows I wish Amazon would have made from the appendices of The Lord of the Rings, I could just, come up with Gondor, all sorts of shows about Gondor's wars with Umbal that could have had a lot of plots in Harad and in the East, a lot of original stuff that would have been great, showing the two blue wizards, maybe the Kinstrife in Gondor, which was a very serious civil war with disastrous results, or the wars between Arnor and Angmar, Witch King. We could have seen all of that, and it's easy. It's all in the appendices. And they left a lot, the appendices leave a lot to the imagination, meaning to come up with original stuff. Or the wars of the dwarves and orcs, or when the dragons raided the dwarven strongholds. My personal dream, though, would be a show remake of the novel, like The Lord of the Rings, complete adaptation of everything, including plots from the appendices. So I mean, the War of the Ring, and everything we know and love from The Lord of the Rings, from the novel, Frodo, everything, all the story, but with a lot of other plots in Harad, in the Far East, in the North, in Lorien, in everywhere, every place on Middle Earth that took part in this war and that had an active part in the time of the War of the Ring that we know of from the appendices, it could have been a complete plot. So imagine something like Game of Thrones, only in the scopes sense, something huge, but it is The Lord of the Rings. But that's just my silly dream, and I believe that the budget had to be doubled, and it's too much of a chore. So all in all, yeah, that would probably remain a dream. But yeah. As for a second age show, if they really wanted to do it, I believe they should have aimed for either focusing on the creation of the rings or focusing on the last days of the second age. They could ignore the copyright issues with being vague about things and just showing us very, very, very little, but still a lot, if it makes any sense, and I believe it doesn't, because it doesn't make sense to me, but I think it could be done. And I read a comment that someone wrote about showing, like starting the show by showing an elf that plays with humans, with human babies, and then the human babies grow to be men and older men, and the elf remains the same, and then those older men die, and the next generation plays with the same elf, and the elf remains young, and that new generation grows old and dies. Showing something like this, like for, I don't know, few seconds, like a minute maybe, as a prologue, it could have set the idea of why the Númenóreans envied the elf immortality. and it would have solved, in my opinion, a lot of issues that the show stumbled with right now. I thank you all for listening, and I hope I didn't take too much of your time and sanity.